Sometimes the best stories in golf aren't found on tour. You'll find them at the back of the range. And here's your host, Ben Adelberg.
And once again, welcome to another episode here at the back of the range. I am your host, Ben Adelberg. This is episode 189, and it is Masters Week. Sending well wishes to all of the previous guests of the back of the range that are at the Masters this week. Colin Morikawa, Will Zalatoris, Victor Hovland, they all come to mind. Clearly they are favorites and will be for many years to come. But this year, I'm really hoping that Tyler Strafacci, the U.S. Amateur champion, and Ollie Osborne, the USAM runner-up, have an absolutely tremendous week. No matter how many USAMs I end up covering, the U.S. Amateur Abandoned Dunes was my first. So I think I'll always have a special connection with these two guys. I've gotten to know them a lot better since the U.S. Amateur. They're both tremendous supporters of what I'm trying to do here at the back of the range. Would absolutely love to see them both make the cut and then square off on the back nine on Sunday for the honor of low amateur at the 2021 Masters. So a quick intro this week. I'm sure that many of you are excited to watch the wall-to-wall coverage of the Masters. Special shout out to Dottie Pepper. Can't wait to see what she's going to do this week. She also has a new book coming out. You might learn more about that here at the back of the range in the future. She might be making another appearance. We'll just have to see. The merch store is open and the face coverings are back in stock. I know that everyone is getting their vaccine. We're slowly but surely getting back to normal, or at least a new normal. But I still wear these face coverings everywhere I go. These neck gaiters really do seem to be the most comfortable option for me. So if you want one that has the back of the range logo on it, shoot me a DM. I'll hook you up. Hats are for sale. Shirts are for sale. Support this podcast. If you enjoy listening each and every week, your support and your reviews really do mean a lot. And remember, the central hub of the back of the range is on the website, thebackoftherange.com. Now, as I mentioned during the intro to last week's episode, I've got a few episodes banked that I still need to get released before we get closer to the Walker Cup. And I thought that this week would be a fun week to release the episode that I had with Bruce McGill. Now, Bruce McGill has amassed an incredible film, theater, and TV career that includes his role as D-Day in Animal House, Sheriff Farley in My Cousin Vinny, and his portrayal of Walter Hagen in The Legend of Bagger Vance. So I thought it'd be fun to have Bruce on the podcast, share some stories about his career and filming The Legend of Bagger Vance. He is an incredible storyteller. He's an absolute treasure. It was a privilege to have him on the podcast. We had a lot of fun. I think you could probably hear my golf and movie dorkdom kind of come out even more so than previous episodes. But hope you enjoy listening to this episode. Let's get started right away. Bruce, you're at the back of the range. How are you?
Well, thank you, Ben. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm great. And I kind of have this rule here at the podcast where I try not to have a guest and record a guest when they don't currently have power or running water, which is why this is slightly delayed, because you and I started kind of chatting and getting this set up right around the time when around when Texas was going through their ordeal, and you're in San Antonio. Your hometown, and you're back from California. So before we talk about, gosh, there's so many things to talk about, and I need to contain my excitement, but what have you been dealing with the last couple of weeks in San Antonio?
It was amazing. And the one thing that my wife doesn't want to hear anymore is, it's unprecedented. This never happens, because now it has.
Right.
It was extraordinary. And I've worked, she was born and raised in northern Canada in Edmonton. And so she really is traumatized by extreme cold.
Of course.
And I never knew what extreme cold was till I did a movie in the winter in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And I experienced significantly sub-zero temperatures. And I just was amazed that anything on the planet could be like that. In fact, one day I woke up for work and it was 58 degrees below zero. And it was a news blurb on CNN or something. They said, I almost remember it verbatim. They said, an unseasonably cold mass of Arctic air has seized Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada today, where the temperature is 58 degrees below zero. To give you some sense of perspective, the temperature on the surface of the moon is 63 below. And now a word from Coca-Cola. I think that's verbatim. And I heard that and I sat bolt upright and I hate sit-ups.
Uh-huh.
I was still in bed. I would leave the news on to see, how to dress, or was I even going to venture out that day if I didn't have to? And that just really got my attention. Well, it was with wind chill here in San Antonio, Texas, where it never happens. It was significantly below zero, and it was just strange. And we lost power, of course, as 4 million other Texans did, which is also quote unquote unheard of, unprecedented. And it wasn't from trees being blown down or broken because of ice. It was just a power grid that was not ready for it. The power grid in Texas is designed to handle huge loads in the super hot summers when
Right.
everybody air conditions, and they let a lot of their grid go down because it's not winterized. So they basically mothball it in the summer. I mean, in the winter, to prepare and have it ready for air conditioning. But we lost power, which of course you may have gas heat, but it's circulated by an electric fan.
Sure.
You have no heat, you have no light, you have no way to. Well, I have a car that I can charge my devices on, so I never thought I'd need it as much as I did. But we have a gas stove, so I had a little, barbecue torch thing that I could light the stove with, so I could cook. I'm the cook in the family, and we did eat well because we wanted to make sure we ate anything in the freezer in case it thawed out and rotted.
Of course. Yeah.
But then I thought, no, we'll take it out of the freezer to warm up. It was so cold, and it was days. And then I had a job also I was supposed to go do, and I wanted to do, and I liked the guys, and I liked the part, and I liked the movie. It was the Kurt Warner story,
Right.
sports story. And then this thing, they kept scheduling my flights, and I think it was 7 flights were scheduled by the production, all canceled. And this was in the cold. There was a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday when it was well below freezing, and dipped below zero. And I finally called them and I said, look, I like your movie. I want to do your movie, but this is ridiculous. I can't get out of here. So I think you guys, there are 2 brothers that direct these films. And I said, I think whichever one of you is the better actor should play this part. I just can't make it. And they said, no, we want you to. And as it turned out, the director had gone home to Nashville. We're shooting in Oklahoma City. He'd gone home to Nashville to see his family and was also stranded at the airport in Houston.
Uh-huh.
So they chartered a plane and picked him up in Houston. And I said, well, look, that's great, but I can't leave my wife in a federally mandated emergency situation and go off and make a movie. And they said, well, we'll have a seat for her too. So hats off to those guys. And John and Andy Irwin, good guys. So we flew out of here, and the last thing we did at her insistence, she's a very careful person, was turn the water off at the street, which is, if you don't have one of those tools the water company uses, it's not an easy thing to do. It's a big old honking valve. They don't want you turning off your own water,
Right.
because they mean you can turn it back on. So I got out, there was 9 degrees, and I'm turning the water off and opening a tap so we hopefully avoid pipe damage. And off we went to the airport and to get in a Beechcraft King Air and fly San Antonio to Oklahoma City, where there was colder, and they had 16 inches of snow, but they are more used to winter and their infrastructure was less, although they had shutdowns and power problems and broken water mains.
Oh my gosh.
So needless to say, that was not a week of golf.
No, that was.
But it was unbelievable. And now coming back, it looks like the post-apocalyptic. So much that's usually not dead is dead. Vegetation, I'm talking about.
Right.
And it's just so sad. And all you can do is sort of sit back and see whether spring springs this year or not.
Well, I know that I have a lot of friends in the Dallas area, and I've talked to a lot of the collegiate golfers down there in Texas and Arkansas and Oklahoma, and they're a lot of them are struggling. They're like, they want to play, they want to get sharp, and they just really don't have tons to do. You obviously, we're going to definitely talk about your role as Walter Hagen in the movie The Legend of Bagger Vance, but it's kind of a rite of passage for anyone that comes on the podcast. We have to learn actually how you got into the game of golf. So
pretty good story, actually.
We tell stories here. So
I was I started acting when I was very young, and I was doing plays at the age that most kids start playing sports and stuff. And I loved playing football with my buddies in the, down in the somebody who had a big yard on a crisp autumn day, where football's on TV and it's great. But I didn't have any desire to go down to the field house in August and bust heads against some of the monsters that they breed for Texas football.
Sure.
So I was doing plays anyway, and that was a very, I took a lot of ragging from the people mostly guys that played football in my junior high and high school. They called me unkind things because I was words you can't use now, but they said anybody that was in the drama department or in plays was a drama queer.
Less than masculine.
Well, I kicked a few of their asses, I have to say.
Well, there you go.
Physically, I couldn't stand it. I had a temper and I had skills. So then I got respect, and when that didn't work, I outdrank them a little bit, and that was good respect in Texas for a 15-year-old who can hold his liquor. Okay. I don't think I'm kidding.
I don't think you are either.
But anyway, it was trial by fire, and so I was not playing any sports or any golf. But my father was an avid golfer, and really, really wanted me to appreciate the game because once you do become enamored of the game, it gives you so much in your life. But I had, it was only so many daylight hours, and I had play practice after school and not golf team practice. So I went on about my way and made my way very challenging to get out of San Antonio, Texas, and get to Broadway or Shakespeare in the Park or the feature film or television career that I've had. So I was pretty busy doing that, and I was living in New York at the time, and I was very close to my parents, and I really liked them. I never, even though it was the 60s, I never had that, generation gap between my folks and myself. It was a solid, great, and loving relationship. People say you were lucky because of what I've done as an actor, but I sure was lucky to be born in the United States to the people I was born to. That was really lucky. And, they're talking about lucky to get an acting break, but no, man, a nurturing childhood and an education, and ongoing support is priceless.
Yeah,
anyway, absolutely. I would go down, especially when it turned bitter cold in New York. I would come down to visit. I came down to visit not just when it was cold, and I wanted to spend some time with my father. And I'd either have to go to the office where he was, because he was either at the office or on the golf course. And I wasn't about to go to. He was an insurance salesman, and I wasn't about to go to the office. That didn't seem interesting. So I would go with him to the golf course, and the game. Like it does for so many people, at first seems inane. Why would you spend the time and the money to do that, to chase that ball around that cow pasture with that long stick? And so I was there basically to get to know him. And then little by little, he said, it'll either creep up your leg and bite you or it won't.
Right.
Doesn't matter. Let's go. And I don't remember the specific time or what it was. Maybe it was a chip that sank or a putt that was holed. Because he was a 4 to an 8 handicap,
Wow,
pretty good player.
Yeah,
good player, and loved it, just loved it. And he would say, just, I'll tell you what, when you're starting out, keep score by the number of balls you lose. It's the same thing. The lower the number, the better.
Sure.
So, and he said, you ought to foot mash that out from behind that tree. You can't hit that shot. And also what he was doing was making sure I kept up with him and his real golfer buddies.
Right.
And then the next thing you know, for a few years, wonderful years, we were playing head to head. We were, no strokes given. We were playing serious head to head.
Right.
Every shot counts, match play. And he was never happier than when I beat him, which shows what a generous man he was.
Sure.
I said this to a friend of mine whose father was a golf pro, and I said, I expected the same thing. I said, well, he was never happier than when I beat him. And my friend said, not my dad, boy. He hated it. If I beat him, he was furious for 3 days. But anyway, I started playing to get to know my father better, literally. But once you have the bug, you have the bug. And I didn't have clubs of my own. I would, believe it or not, my father was left-handed. So I would come down and I'd play with my mother's Lady Burke. I guess they were Jackie Burke.
Burke
or Patty Burke.
Patty Burke,
She had those too, but I think she also had some Lady Burke, which I think was Jack Burke's clubs for women. Lady Burke's. And Patty, she had a Patty Bird couple of clubs too. Anyway, I would play with her clubs, which was sort of silly. But at the time, it didn't matter.
Right.
But then my friend and roommate, when we were doing Delta House, which was based on Animal House, Jamie Widows, he's 6'6", and he woke me up one day, like looming over me, and said, "You're going to buy my golf clubs. I'm getting some 1.5-inch over lengths, and you're buying mine." I said, "I don't want to." And I'll never forget them. They were Hogan Apex 2 pure blades.
Oh, good luck.
And you know, they were not they were wonderful when you hit them well, but they were not easy to hit.
No.
But that's what I sort of started on. So you either give up the game or you find a way to find that sweet spot. And so I started playing and with my peers instead of just my father and his friends. And that's a whole other thing, because then the the social aspects of the game with your peer group. And by the way, in golf, your peer group can be anywhere from 10 years younger than you to 40 years older than you.
Of course.
It's just people that, generally share, it's mostly people within 5 or 6 shots of a handicap, because it's just more fun if you have it's competition. It's good, even if whatever level.
Yeah. No.
So that was the beginnings of the game for me. And I started getting invited to some celebrity tournaments, and I thought, well, that's fun. They gave me a sweater. Oh, that's nice. I got a putter. Oh, this is pretty cool. And then when Legend of Bagger Vance came out, my golf stock went way up.
Oh gosh.
That's when I got the invitation. And I always, before that movie, I wanted to have an official handicap, because I always wanted to play at Lake Tahoe, at that Tahoe celebrity tournament.
American Century.
And you had to have an official handicap. In those days, it had to be single digit. And so I worked down to where I had a single digit handicap. And when you get that far down, you're playing a lot and you're loving it. And I played on location. Wherever I went, I took the clubs, because when you're a character actor, meaning not the leading man, you'd have a lot of days where you don't work. And wherever I was, there was a golf course. I mean, all over the world.
Right.
I'm talking.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. That's definitely something I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned, obviously you mentioned Animal House. I know that is something that you are asked about in many different interviews, and anytime an article is written, I know that they drop the Daniel Simpson Day. I mean, you played D-Day, and when I told my friends and listeners I was going to have you on the podcast, and I said, yes, it's the guy that played Hagen in Bagger Vance, and they're like, yeah, and then a lot of them were like, yeah, but that's D-Day. I'm like, yes, I know that's D-Day. And I'm not going to ask you to recount the stories of filming that in Oregon, and you were playing a fictitious collegiate student, but I've had many Longhorns on this podcast. 3 of them are 4 members of the current team. The Cootie brothers and Cole Hammer and Travis Vick. But you, sir, are a graduate of the University of Texas. You have your degree in drama. And I don't know if you've ever been asked this, but what was life as a collegiate student in, gosh, what is this, like late 60s, early 70s?
Yeah, well, it was pretty weird. I mean, the first thing that happened, I was my first year, because I went out, I had what they now call a gap year. I had a job doing trade shows, making money as an actor. And I said, okay, that's what I'm doing.
Right.
And I went out and did that. And it sort of, it deteriorated into something that was actually pretty good, to something that was like trade shows and shopping centers, And I said, that's not it. So I went to my father always wanted me to go to college, and he would say, well, Bruce, you can go to any school you want to, as long as it's the University of Texas.
Simple.
Simple. And, you look back, the economics of it was a great school. Don't get me wrong. It was a really great, still is. But in those days, if you were a resident of the state of Texas, I think your tuition was like $50 a semester.
Oh. And
then when they started charging by the hour, my most expensive tuition was I think I can still see the receipt, $151.50. I think and I have a degree. Some people would say it's a useless degree. It's a Bachelor of Fine Arts in acting. But hey, I made a living out of it.
I was going to say, it seems like you've made a profit on that investment. And I'm just thinking of all the I'm thinking of all the collegiate golfers that listen to my podcast that just heard that your tuition for a semester was about $150. They're crying in their ramen soup right now.
Well, tough racket, man, because there's a lot of guys that play good golf, and I know a lot of guys that at their home course, there's a kid back at Lakeside and has the course record now. He shot a 61, and that doesn't mean you can go take that and have it travel.
That's right.
and then it's very difficult, that life. I'm tired of the travel that I do, and I usually, when I go on location, it's for at least a couple of weeks, even if it's a smaller part.
Right.
But those guys they're road warriors. That's a road warrior, and
Yeah.
that's tough. And the guys that start out, and they do mention it, and the good ones will thank whoever it was that was already on tour that helped them out, and gave them a little guidebook or little directions of how you survive that. And there's so many guys that are really good players that are never gonna, they're never gonna scare the FedEx top 30.
Right. Yeah. How is there any sort of a correlation between, I mean, like, I guess it's safe to say, like, okay, so Animal House came out in 78. I'm guessing you graduated 71, 72, something in that neighborhood. I mean,
I was in college 69 to 73.
Okay, 73. But I'm guessing, is it fair to say that those 5 years before Animal House, I mean, I know you're doing Shakespeare, you're doing a lot of theater work, but I'm guessing it's just a grind. You're struggling. Is there a correlation between, I know a lot of the mini tour guys that are trying to make it professionally and play on the PGA Tour, they're dealing with that as well. Like, how do you know that this is your path? I mean, was giving up on acting like ever an option for you?
Well, not without trying.
Right.
I knew I was going to try, and I hoped I would have the good sense if it didn't work out. And they tell you, give yourself a certain amount of time. You can pick the number,
Right.
2 years, 5 years, 10 years. But one of the toughest things to watch was actors that you met when you were first in the pro leagues, like in your early 20s. And they were just not going to cut it. You could tell, but then they'd get a job and they'd be in for another 2 or 3 years thinking they'd cut it. And they don't really get out of it and into something else until it's too late to make much of a living doing anything else, because if you're looking to hire somebody in your company and you've got a sharp, bright, good looking 21-year-old guy and a sort of good looking, sharp, bright 45-year-old guy, you're going to hire the younger guy.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10. So that's tough. But I kept it in the back of my mind. I never was one of those that felt like, and I think they're lying when they say it, I had to make it as an actor because I couldn't have done anything else. I figure I could have done anything that I pretend to do in the movies. I just feel like I could, but I didn't ever have to really. There was a struggle financially, but I never stopped working because in the theater, if you're a good actor and a good stage actor, and in my case, especially if you were really a little bit of a head start at the playing of Shakespeare. And what I always wanted to do since I read about it was Shakespeare in the Park in New York City. And this was the weirdest slip up in my life. I made this impossible dream when I was sitting on the curb in my house in San Antonio, Texas. I was maybe 16, 17. And I said, I want to be on stage, Shakespeare in the Park, New York City, with a speaking role by the time I'm 25. And, that was sort of giving myself that much time to at least get on that path.
Right.
And the slip up was, it happened. And at 20, I didn't make a plan past that. So there I was at 25, and this modest goal, looking back on it, was achieved. And so I was rudderless for a few months while I made a new North Star to keep the thing cruising through the rough waters on. But I always worked enough. One month I had to sell one of my guitars to pay rent, but it was a guitar I didn't like very much anyway. And I that's the only time I never had to, beg, borrow, or anything from my parents, which was really surprising to my father. He just couldn't believe that. But I lived very modestly, and not like the young players in the golf world. They have roommates. I had roommates, and in New York City, my God, I don't know. I asked a guy when I was there the last time I was doing a movie, and I said, how does a young actor move to New York to become an actor anymore? And he said, oh, they don't. They move to Jersey. Because
Okay.
But we were 3 guys in a 1-bedroom apartment, and it was okay. We were young, and I had the greatest time in New York City. I was there from 1975 to 92. And that was before cocaine was bad, before AIDS.
Right.
Women had been on the birth control pill for 12 or 15 years by then, and they were in the beginnings of the female movement, the women's movement, and they were very aggressive. And once you'd done D-Day and Animal House and some Shakespeare in the Park, and you had enough money to buy dinner in your pocket, life was really good. It was fun.
I can imagine.
It was a lot of fun. And now I go, my God, I only go if somebody hires me and gives me per diem and picks me up at the hotel. But I had a great time there. It was great. And anyway, I think there is a parallel, but I never really had to. I never had to wait tables because I was doing repertory theater in Providence, Rhode Island, and I got an audition for Shakespeare in the Park, which was still my target, going on. So I was always trying to find a way to get there. And I got the audition, and I was doing a play in Providence, Rhode Island, where that repertory company was. So on our dark day, in the theater, the word dark day means you have a day off.
Right.
You work 6 days a week. So I went down on a train from Providence to New York and auditioned for a production of Hamlet, and I got the part. Didn't get it right away. I had to train down like 3 separate times until I only had like $150 left in the bank. And I bought my last train ticket, and I said, okay, the season was over in Providence, and I said, I'm not coming back till I know one way or the other. And I went to that audition, and the man himself, Joe Papp, who was a towering figure of the New York theater at the time, was at the audition, and he gave his approval. So in my third audition for that, I got the part, and I just felt home. I was so comfortable in New York at that time. I was so excited, and it was great. And because I had a great teacher at the University of Texas in the playing of Shakespeare. By the way, he was 95 and 96 years old.
Oh, wow.
And he was, I would say, certainly one of the top 3 teachers I ever had. From formal teachers. Everybody teaches me when I work with the great directors or whatever. But he gave me a real head start on the playing of Shakespeare. And in Shakespeare in the Park, in Joe Papp's world, the public theater, he did a lot of casting of people that maybe they were on a soap opera and the public knew them, but they didn't have the chops. And at Shakespeare, to play Shakespeare really well, you have got to have the chops. It's like you can't go out, never seen a golf club and shoot 68.
Yeah.
You just can't do it. So I had an interesting skill set. So I never had to wait tables, or I moved to New York on a Tuesday and started rehearsal on Wednesday morning. And then that play moved to Lincoln Center. And then Joe Papp and his organization wanted me in the next Shakespeare in the Park because I had the skill set, And then John Landis saw a production of Shakespeare in the Park and said, when he was looking to cast D-Day and Animal House, he said, he'd scratched out all the actors that had come in to audition for D-Day. And he realized that when the studio said, look, you start shooting in a couple of weeks, you have to cast that part. It's a principle. And he realized that he'd been auditioning in an ineffective way. He was having the D-Day auditioners read Bluto's part, which is Belushi's part, right. John Belushi. And it just, so he was scratching them all off his list, saying, no. And so now he was under the gun, and he happened to go to Shakespeare in the Park one night. And the next day, the studio said, cast that part. So he had this list of scratched out final callback actors. And he said, okay, who's the best scratched out actor on that list? Oh, Bruce McGill. I saw him in Shakespeare last night. He was really good. And that's how I got, according to John Landis anyway, that's how I got the part of D-Day.
Unreal.
So I went all to Shakespeare. Anyway, so one thing led to another. And the struggle years, my mother used to say, God, you worked so hard and you've been so patient. But it never felt like that to me because there was always movement. And, if you're a theater artist anyway, every new role is a whole new world. Same in the movies, but in the theater, everybody goes to work for the rehearsal period, and then you all do the play every night. And in the movies, you do your bit and they do their bit. And sometimes you can be in a movie with people and never see them. But in the theater, it's a very, you get together and it's a family for a while, and or a team, whichever you prefer. So there was always movement and an ever widening circle of contacts and friends, and it's just a great learning experience the whole way. And by the way, still is. I'm 70. I just got back from doing this movie, and although now usually what I learn is that I know more than I thought I did. I have learned something over that long period of time, because movies especially, there is a real technical skill set that just helps. It doesn't make you a great actor, but it makes you a much more effective actor. And if you have the talent and the energy and that stuff that's unquantifiable, your chops or your skill set or your technique, whatever you want to call it, is really helpful. And it's really helpful to younger actors and young directors to have an actor that really knows his way around the camera and and around structure and story and all that stuff. And in terms of teachers in my life, every great director I've worked with, I've learned a lot from. So it's been a gas, and it still feels great, and I still like to do it, and they still hire me, which is
That helps too.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I feel like when Paul Newman said it, I totally understood it. People said, "When are you going to retire? When are you going to retire?" And he said, "I'll retire when I can't do it the way I want to do it anymore," which basically means when I can't remember the lines.
Right.
And I will say that the older you get, the harder you have to work to learn the lines. But I'm a huge believer in it may not be the most important part of the task, but the primary, meaning you've got to have it. You have to learn your lines. It's not fair to the production and the other people on the crew and in the cast if you don't. Although there are a lot of actors that are good actors and they have given good performances that don't feel that way. But they got some crew people tearing their hair out, I'll tell you.
Oh, I can only imagine what that world must be like when not everyone is actually performing at the same level.
Yeah.
I really what I picked up. Picked up a lot of things by what you just said, but just something as it relates to golfers where you're staying in the process because you see movement. You didn't feel like it was hard work. You didn't feel like you were struggling because you were seeing movement. I think that's the perfect thing to tie in. And also, now we know the answer to the trivia question: what does Shakespeare and Animal House have in common? So that's
that's good.
We finally have the answer to that. It's almost like a very odd 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
That's very funny. No one who doesn't hear this podcast will ever guess it. So you'll drink for free all over the place.
Well, I mean, come on, Bruce. I drink for free wherever I go. Come on, it's me.
Yes,
but no.
Yes, so do I.
Exactly. I'm sure you do.
But you know what? As I said to somebody in another interview, and they really laughed, I said, free stuff is not worth what it costs you.
That's very true. Yeah, free.
True.
Free. You kind of get nervous with free. The older you get. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we talk about Bagger Vance, I always try and at least get something from my guests that could be a lesson for listeners, how they can possibly relate that to their game. And you've already given so much already, but dealing with rejection in your career and also dealing with failure in golf. I have a lot of juniors that, whether they're trying really hard to qualify for USAM or get noticed by a coach, they can get a scholarship. Golf is, as you know, it's a game where you fail more than you succeed. And you're in a profession where you're being told no over and over again for, the many years you've been an actor. And most, as you said, for reasons that you can't control. You're too tall, you're too short, you don't like the sound of your voice. How have you dealt with rejection in your career, and maybe how does that relate to dealing with adversity on a golf course? I know it's kind of related, but I'm just curious how you deal with that.
I have to refer back to what I said earlier about the difference between making it as an actor and making it as an athlete.
Right.
It's subjective. What I do is subjective. They can't say, "Well, that was interesting. Was that a birdie or was that an eagle?"
Right.
I don't know. But in the games like golf, everybody watches, and you have to be very honest, or you never get to play professionally.
Of course.
You count your strokes, and you either made a 3 or you didn't make a 3. So it's a little different that way. But the rejection or the disappointment in not getting where you want to be, as long as you feel like there is movement, and it may be sideways, it may be peaks and valleys. You may plateau, and then you may drop back when you make a change or something, and it's just. The individual has to always examine the choice and the belief, because you don't want to, believe in yourself when it's folly. But that you only learn over time, because you never know after, how many years in the wilderness is like a football term that Dick Vermeil used when he was coaching. I just did the Kurt Warner story, and he asked Kurt Warner, "How many years were you in the wilderness?" Meaning he was great in college and then nothing for 5 years. He was stacking groceries. And Vermeil, the same thing. He was out of the game for a while. But you the rejection part of it for me, I have a different solution to, because I can just say when I go in and do the work and do the preparation, which I always do, besides the general preparation of my whole life, I prepare specifically if I'm going to go in and lay it out there for somebody who might or might not buy me for that part. If I do a good job and I know that they were entertained if they were supposed to be entertained, or startled if they were supposed to be startled, or amused if they were supposed to be amused, if I do that and I know it was good, and I know that I can tell, it's like music. When you hit a clinker note.
Right.
I know when I got every note and it's good. And then I get the call from the agent, it's not you, they're going another way. I'll go, God, that's unbelievable. They could have had Bruce McGill for that much money and they didn't. Wow, that's crazy.
Huh.
So I do that, and I'm not kidding either. I mean, I really feel that way. Then sometimes, of course, I'll see the final product and go, you know what, they were right.
Okay.
That guy was better at that part than I am, because I have a certain essence, and his essence was a little different and a little more right for the part. But always because there's no point in wallowing in the rejection. It's just, okay, next. In fact, the agents come up with all kinds of ways to tell you didn't get the part. Like, it's not going your way today. They're going, well, it's because of this. And when you're a young actor, you go, why not?
Right.
And now I just go, no is all I need. Thanks. Not you.
Yeah.
Not your day, kid.
Yeah. We don't need all the dressing. Just give me the name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
So at this point in my life, because I'm a very careful money manager, and that's an interesting thing about managing your money. I was, even before I had any at all, I would never, like, when we get paycheck from Shakespeare in the Park, which was next to nothing, I wouldn't go out that night. I'd go out the night before payday if I had any left from the last payday.
Smart.
And it's Benjamin Graham, who was Warren Buffett's mentor. It's always live beneath your means, save and invest the difference. So I started on that track a long, long time ago. So, I can afford to not get jobs. I can afford to not do jobs if I don't like them. So now I'm in a great spot where I don't, very few exceptions. I auditioned for Steven Spielberg for Lincoln because he asked me to. And there are people that if they ask, I'll go, sure. But for the most part, mostly I work by offer now. And it's interesting, when you work that way, you generally get the better parts and the better deal.
Yeah.
Because they came after you. And so now the rejection is, I don't have much of it. I get disappointed and stuff if I don't get an offer on something that because you'll find out they're circling, they're sort of interested, and you let yourself get as excited as you can get.
Right.
But it's out of my hands at that point.
Right.
And then the question is, can you make the deal? Like right now, I'm talking about a thing that I'd really like to do if it wasn't shooting in Canada. But in the time of COVID, I'm 70 years old, leaving my wife here because they won't let her travel across the border. She's down here. We're trying to build a major construction project here. And, all those kind of things come into it. If it was in Georgia or in shooting in Texas, bam, I could go home for 2 days if I needed to. But I really have to decide, and I really want to do it. And it's, I don't know. In fact, that call that just came in was from my agent. He probably wants me to crap or get off the pot about it. But I'm still working through the other impacts of leaving the country. And it's a 4-month job. That's a long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know. I'm still working through that. But the rejection thing, I don't have much of that anymore. But when I did have it, I found a broad-shouldered, manly way to deal with it. Because if you don't do that, you don't have the stones. You don't have the stuff for it.
Right.
Because it's you don't need just the skill set and the talent. And I'm speaking about golf now too.
Sure.
You also need a kind of heart and a kind of indomitable will that will enable you to climb over those obstacles. I'm thinking now about Walter Hagen. There's a wonderful book. All I really needed, I knew who Walter Hagen was before I even knew they were making a movie of it. But there's a great book called The Walter Hagen Story by the Hague himself. And it's a interesting juxtaposition of stuff written with a ghostwriter by Walter Hagen about himself. And then interspersed with that is chapters written by his fellow competitors or sports writers of the day. And it's just fascinating to go back and forth. And his early days, he was he was a drafted baseball player. The Detroit Tigers drafted him, so he was a. And if you ever look at pictures, there's not much film of Hagen, but there's stills, and you can see that his lead foot, his left foot in his case, is pretty normal at address. But if you look at him after impact, that left foot is pointed straight down the line of play.
Right.
And he pivoted it, and almost like stepping into a batter's box. But in the beginning, I mean, he was he thought he was talented and all that, but he got his hand handed to him when he tried to get into the U.S. Open at first. And then he was a winter employee at the Rochester Country Club of Rochester, taking care of things. And he was determined. So he got a rule book, and he learned the rules better than anybody else. And he used that to his advantage. And he also learned to not dress quite like a Yahoo that he had when he first tried to qualify.
Of course.
Apparently he looked like a gypsy gigolo.
Yeah, he definitely made his mark in gosh, every single way you can possibly fathom in the game of golf. So this movie comes out in 2000, and I mean these are some serious heavy hitters. I mean, Robert Redford's directing. It's Jack Lemmon's. I love how Jack Lemmon's, it's his last appearance on film, and he was such a fixture at the Crosby at Pebble Beach.
Oh, of course.
I just love that piece. And then, Charlize Theron, Will Smith, Matt Damon, and then I know that it was Lane Smith's last film appearance, who your co-star in My Cousin Vinny.
Yes.
And
Lane.
Yeah, I know, that is so good.
He was a character.
Oh yeah. What? So how did you mention? That now in your career you're not really auditioning. You're getting a lot of offers. I mean, you do audition, but you get mainly offers. I don't know the history of how this comes your way. I mean, I'm thinking.
Well, there was no offer there. Very interesting actually. I knew the book. I had read the book, and I knew who Hagen was. But I was in my sailing phase at that time. I did a lot of blue water sailing, and when that film was casting, I had just bought my first sailboat, and I bought it in Hawaii, and I was sailing it back myself. It was a 39-foot, 6-inch Danish-built kind of a Grand Prix ocean race boat, really. Very Spartan, but really strong and really fun. And so I was at sea for 19 days, 1 hour, and 25 minutes. I don't know why I remember exactly.
Oh, my God.
And this boat had no autopilot and no refrigeration. And it was myself and two other guys, and it was an extraordinary adventure. And when I got to the land in L.A., I didn't even have my land legs yet, and I got a phone call and said Robert Redford's looking to cast this role, and you had to be single-digit handicap with proof to audition for either the Bobby Jones part or the Walter Hagen part, which thankfully I was because of the Tahoe deal. Yeah. And you still had to have your swing videotaped and shown to the PGA Master Professional, who was a technical advisor, Tim Moss, great guy. We lost him a few years ago. He was great. And so Redford would look at the tape of your swing and say, okay, is that a golf swing? And in my case, he said, yes, that is. So then it was a no-brainer. I mean, I never really went in to see Redford because he was already in Savannah, Georgia. I went in and did a video conference audition, my first and only, by the way. And I said my lines in an office building in Universal City, California. And the casting director was in Savannah, and she recorded it, burned a disc, took it to Redford. And less time than it took me to drive back to my house in Marina del Rey from the audition, he had looked at the disc and said, that's the guy. So I walked into my house in Marina del Rey area and got a phone call like a few minutes after I get in. And he said, he was an English agent. And he said, is Walter Hagen there? And I said, no way. He said, way. So then, at that case, I wasn't even interested in the number. I didn't care what the number was. I was going to do it. And that's another, the thing about the business of being an actor. There's lots of reasons to take a part. It's not always just the money. The money's always in there because, as my agent will tell me, yeah, Bruce, but you don't need money for this job, but money is respect. So we've got to, whatever they have for that part, you got to get. I say, okay, great. You worry about that. But you take it for the role, like the Hagen role, I would have taken it. You take it for where it shoots, Kiowa Island, hello, not bad.
I was going
to say. You take it for the people involved, hello, Robert Redford, Matt Damon, Charlize, who I love. There's lots of reasons to take a role. And in that case, they all kind of rolled into one. And it was just people always ask, what's your favorite movie you've ever done? And it's an impossible question.
Yeah.
I have a handful. So that's Animal House, Legend of Bagger Vance, My Cousin Benny, always Lincoln, because it was such a classy, classy job. And Matchstick Men, Ridley Scott movie that I loved. And I have Cinderella Man. I got a bunch that I'm really, actually, really fortunate in the number of quality projects I've gotten to be in, because that requires judgment and selectivity. Somebody once asked me, she was smart enough to answer her own question in mid question. She said, referring to all this different kinds of things I'd done, and she said, "How do you get a career like that? You pass on the money, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, you do.
Huh.
At certain times, you just say, no, that's a money job, but this is a better job."
Yeah.
And that was just, obviously, again, subjective. It's a judgment call on my part.
Now,
But so it's it's strategic, and I would imagine there's a certain kind of strategic approach to trying to get on the tour. And there's no shortage of guys that can play golf. I mean, the college programs are bumping out guys. It's just incredible.
oh yeah.
When you watch the NCAAs and all that stuff, these guys can play golf, and so you have to plot a course. You have to be strategic, I imagine, because I know I did. And my strategy now looking back on it, it was a successful strategy, because I feel good about where I am. I feel I never wanted to be the guy with the big $1 million smile on the front of People magazine. I never wanted to be famous, because it's a two-edged sword, but the sharper edge is the bad edge, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Especially in the time of social media. So I often refer to myself, and I'm not dissing myself. I refer to myself as undercover actor, because people will say, "Hey, hey, you're that you're that guy. You're that guy that played that part, aren't you?" And I went, "Well, I don't know. That's kind of vague." But the best ever. This was the best, and I have a witness. My wife was sitting in the airplane with me. We were in the first class section of an airplane going somewhere, and a flight attendant, she comes up from the back of the plane, and she says, and I'm not lying, she said, "There's somebody back there that says that you're somebody, but you're not anybody, are you?" And I looked at her and I said, "No, ma'am, I am not anyone at all."
There you go.
And in a philosophical way, I'm not. I'm just a guy that does a certain thing. But the way she said it, I mean, I don't even think she realized
No, that's
quite how that came out.
That's perfect,
But
though.
I thought it was just the greatest question for me to give a great answer. No, man, I'm not anyone at all.
I'm nobody.
I am not anyone at all.
What-
But anyway, I think that enables me to be believable in more and varied characters. If they don't know me, Bruce McGill, they can buy me. Although now, I've been sitting in movie theaters. Sometimes I used to go, pre-COVID, obviously, to watch a movie that I was in a regular paying audience. And I was in one of them, and right behind me, at my first appearance in the film, the guy behind me said to his buddy, he said, "Oh man, there's this guy. This guy does something every time he's in a movie. He does something. Something's going to happen with that guy." And I thought, that's interesting. I think that's part of what makes me hireable. It's a known, unknown quantity.
That's a really bizarre. That's a bizarre compliment. I mean, you have to take it as a compliment. I mean, that guy does something at every. That's
yeah. Well, another guy said, and this is me blowing my own horn. It's somebody. There were several of us sitting around, and somebody complimentarily said, "Boy, you really get some good parts." And the guy standing next to him said, "He makes parts good."
Boom.
And I thought, yeah, that is right. I look for when I'm looking at a part, I look for, does it have what I call ammunition? Is there anything in it? It doesn't have to be a big part, like The Insider, another one of my favorites.
Is there room for you in it?
Yeah. Is there something I can do that that's got some pizzazz? And is it directly affect the main storyline? Because I'm a supporting actor, meaning I support the filmmaker in his attempt to tell this story the way he's got it on the page. And I'm cheerful, and I like it so much that I'm fun to work with. If it was a golf deal, I'm not the miserable golfer with his head down grumbling. I'm the happy, joyful player.
What did you? I could tell that you're doing a lot of research with all of your roles, and I'm guessing you said you knew Hagen pretty well, but you mentioned the book that you read. Help me out. Is there something that you learned about Hagen that maybe you didn't know or that people wouldn't know? Obviously, I'm not saying you actually applied it to the role, but in your research, what was something perhaps interesting about Hagen that you didn't know?
Well, I didn't know that he was such a pure professional. He never hit a shot for fun, somebody said. And he was also a master match player. He would make the difficult shots look easy and the easy shots look very difficult. If he knew he could make a shot, he was a showman, you know. And I'll tell you one thing that I did not know that is very impressive is I did know that he had knocked down the clubhouse doors to get pros to be able to go into the locker room at the nice clubs in the world. And that was very important. And that endeared him to the golfing world. But he also, they wanted him to play exhibitions. This was just after World War One. And so he said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll play in your event if you put up some ropes and charge people $0.25 to get in, and we'll give the money to the Red Cross. So he was the beginning of golf and charity. And if you looked around every golf tournament you see, they get the guy that's sponsoring it, CEO of the company sponsoring it,
of course, talking
about what they've done for charity. And also the fact that he was known as a partier and he'd show up late for tea times and stuff. But a lot of times he knew he had that going on and he was working everybody. He might have been, he'd put his jacket or something under his couch and sleep on it to make it wrinkled and show up in a tux so people would think he'd been out all night.
Right.
And although sometimes in the beginning, I believe that he was out all night. And he was he was a really good guy too. He started a golf club business and he started in Longview, Florida, near Orlando.
Yeah.
And it was the days of hickory shafts, you know. So he was a terrible businessman because he was very busy still playing golf. But he always paid his people. He would never, even if he was not making any money, so he was, emptying his own pockets. So a businessman that knew him said, look, let's take this. I'm going to show you how to make money. There's no reason Walter Hagen Club should not be a moneymaker. So Hagen said, okay, great. So the guy said, first of all, we got to get out of here. We'll move it to Arizona. And of course, these wooden shafts that they spent from Florida to Arizona, the lack of humidity, they all shrunk, and the shafts were shrinking and falling out of the hosels. And Hagen was just he stood behind every set, apparently. But it was a tough lesson. And then he got involved with Wilson, and Wilson said, look, we'll do it. If Spalding, who's a baseball player, can have a golf club line, you'll have a golf club line. Right. So then he sort of just became an endorser. But he was just a really fascinating, interesting guy. And he fought a hook. I didn't know that. He had that weird ropey swing, and he fought a hook all his life. So, and just a no quit inning and a master ice, as somebody said about him. Oh, he was cool. He could relax sitting on a hot stove. And Paul Runyon tells a great story about him. One of the days that he was late for the tea time, and because they really wanted him it was a big event, a 4-ball of some kind. I don't remember the event, but Runyon was very young and just starting out. And he's there and he's paired with Hagen and he's excited, and Hagen doesn't show and he doesn't show. And now Runyon is really disappointed. And the people that put on the tournament said, well, we'll just move his tea time because we got to have him. So he shows up late. He's got his shoes in his hands. He changes on the first or second tee, picks up on most of the holes on the front 9, saying it in his bon vivant way, oh, Paul will play him on this hole. And then Runyon looked down, shook his head and said he went 6 under on the back.
Yeah.
So he was a cat, just a great cat.
When you're filming this movie, I know that like for Tin Cup, I know that Peter Kostas and Gary McCord, they worked a lot with Kevin Costner, and Joel Gretsch was the actor that played Bobby Jones, and you portrayed Hagen. And I don't think it's a revelation here that nothing against Matt Damon, but did not get the feeling that he was an avid golfer at the time.
No, boy, he had the will, but he didn't have the way yet.
Yeah. I remember. I mean, I've seen the movie countless times. It was like, nope, that's not him.
Well, this is why Redford intelligently, and Redford is a great, smart guy. I really liked working with him. That's why he said there have to be single digits with golf swings to play Hagen and Jones, because they can't have non-golfers. I mean, they'll forgive Matt because he's so pretty when he smiles and all that.
Well,
and he tried hard. I mean, he practiced till his hands bled, but you can't learn the golf swing in 5 weeks. And especially he played a lot of baseball, and that's really a recipe for hitting out of the top.
Oh yeah, and it's Juna. It's not it's not Hagen. It's not Jones. But I mean,
No,
but the one thing I wanted to ask, you're in Kiowa, and you're basically I believe you hit every shot on film. So there was not.
I did.
Okay, so
I had no double.
but you can't really roll up and bring your Callaway Big Bertha and your Ping irons. That's not going to work. So, like, was it? I'm just curious. Like, right? Hickory is kind of a thing now. People are kind of getting back into it. But how difficult was it for you? I mean, you got a swing, you got a game, but how difficult was it for you to be like, okay, what's this thing in my hand now?
Yeah, well, first of all, they don't go as far, even if you hit them really well, unless
Right.
you're Bobby Jones. And they have a very sharp leading edge. These were not just hickory; they were period hickory.
Right.
So I came to really like the short work clubs, the wedges and stuff, because they would cut the turf, and I was pretty good at finding the middle of the club face. You have to get close to the center. It was even worse than my Hogan Apex 2s that I started with. So you had to hit the center. And they were. I liked the irons okay. The woods were really tricky because they're wood, and they were whipped. They were
right.
Whipped onto the shaft, which is also wooden. And I'm not going to tell a story on me because Joel and I could hit them fine. They just wouldn't go as far as our Big Bertha, as you put it.
Right.
But Matt broke 5 of them because he would hit them in the neck. And some of the mornings there in Kiowa were quite chilly. They were cold. And if you hit that thing in the neck, you'll snap it. You got to be in the sweet spot of those especially on a cold morning. And the poor prop guy who would source these things, some were replicas, but some of them were actual clubs he found in Scotland.
Oh, God.
And he'd say I remember this one morning, the poor guy, I think he'd already broken 2. And he came up to Redford, and it was a par 5, and said, could Matt maybe hit an iron off this tee? And Redford looked at him like he was crazy and said, It's a par 5. Of course he can't hit an iron. It's a par 5. Okay. But he was running out of play clubs and drivers.
Okay, so now hold on. This just triggered a question for me. In the scene, gosh, I'm really showing my golf movie dorkdom right now. But hey, that's why I have a golf podcast, so it's okay. But but the scene where it's very windy in that match, and he is basically hitting kind of a driving iron 2-iron. Is there any reason that part was added to the movie that is maybe consistent with the fact that Matt Damon kept snapping necks off of woods?
It's possible, but I couldn't verify that.
Okay.
I don't know. That I'm trying to think now. It's a long time since I read the book. That may well have been in the book.
Okay, I'll have to reread. But
no, and I was usually when we were out there, people said, "Oh, you got to play golf all day already." I said, "No, we didn't. We stood across the fairway while Matt played golf."
Okay, well, that's what I was going to
ask. And made eyes with Charlize.
There, well, I mean, she is next on the podcast. I'm going through the whole cast, but no, I'm just kidding.
Oh, just give her I just love her. She's just great, and she wasn't the big star then that she was now, and she had a little, she was a little grumpy about the Southern accent and stuff, but I just thought she was great and looked so. In that period stuff, she just was a vision.
Yeah. And
she's just a great cat, man. She is we were all there at Kiowa, and it was, a dangerous long drive to Charleston, and there was a pool table, and that's what we did. We'd shoot some pool, and I just think she's great. And that she's blossomed into such a spectacular actress and producer.
Yeah.
It just makes me feel great. So, tell her Hagen says hello.
If you really think that I'm talking to Charlize Theron, I mean, come on now. But that's okay. What is?
Well, now I think you're a liar.
Well, I mean.
No, I was going to say that's a pretty good get. If you're,
hey, if I can, well, I think you're a pretty good get. I'm just saying. So you mentioned this watching golf all day long, or watching Matt play golf all day long. You have a lot of scenes away from the golf course. I mean, we just mentioned, Charlize Theron and your I love that scene with you and her character Adele when she's recruiting you to play in the match, and and then of course the great cocktail party scene with you and Damon, where you're basically recruiting him to be your sidekick and go on the road.
Yeah.
But those are indoor shots, and as you said, controlled with lighting. But on the golf course, very hard to control the elements, whether the lighting's not right or it's windy or you have to be consistent. I know it's kind of tough, but like, what was a typical day like when it was golf day, so to speak? Like how?
We got pretty lucky. I mean, the day that I had to get in with the alligator was very cold.
Right.
That was but I was glad about that because that makes a big swimming lizard like that lethargic.
Right.
And but it was usually pretty good. And the only thing that was really problematic were the little biting gnats. These no-see-ums, they call them.
Yeah.
Oh God, I had those thick wool socks with my +4s, and they could bite me through that.
Oh.
And so that was what I remember as being untoward. Otherwise, it was just fantastic. I just loved being there, and all those golf courses are spectacular, and they were so hospitable, and it's a cliche of the South, but Kiowa, and that was also a golf movie that cared about golf, and it wasn't sending golf up. It was a great experience, and that course, the Ocean Course, which I played quite a bit when they were doing the mushy stuff. They were talking about off course when they were doing the romance. Right. You had a choice. If you were there, you could either be flown back to LA where I lived at the time or wherever you lived, or you could stay in your room at the resort, Kiowa. And it was a no-brainer. I just stayed there and played those courses, and it was great. Even on days when I would get finished before totally dark, I would go to one of the courses and they'd say, "Good afternoon, Mr. Hagen. Would you be looking for a match?" And I would always say, "Yeah, bring me one of those flat bellies out of the back that I can beat, and let's tee it up for a few hours." Oh. And it was just, everybody was having fun. We were into it. We were enjoying it. And, I figured as much golf as I could play could only make the performance better.
I mean, it's basically research for your role. You're just
absolutely.
That's all it is.
And that's how I deducted everything.
Yeah, because you cared about the movie. You cared about Redford's vision.
Well, then, with golf, it's good to stay in golf. If you're going to be a golfer, you stay. The guys that are really golfers, although with the exception of Bruce Litsky, who'd hang it up for 6 months and go drive race cars. Leaky. But, when I was there, I wanted to stay in the golf head. And also, it's so much fun. And Joel and I would play each other a lot. And that was fun. He's a great guy with a beautiful golf swing.
Yeah.
And we had, we called each other Bobby or Walter. And again, that's working
camp.
On the roll.
It's like
it was fantasy camp.
Fantasy golf
camp. It was fantasy golf camp. Only they gave us money and identical rental cars, which cracked me up.
Oh gosh!
It's because it's a lot of big agencies involved, and if you got guys playing Hagen and Jones, you can't have one guy with a better car than the other guy if the production is providing the car. Uh-huh. But I mean, they could have been a different color. Well, they were identical. It was so funny.
That's crazy.
It's crazy.
You mentioned earlier about traveling, and I had this on something I wanted to ask you. You kind of alluded to earlier when you go travel all over the world, all over the country on different jobs. I'm guessing you're bringing your sticks because there's a golf course nearby. I know this is almost impossible to answer, but can you maybe pinpoint one job that you've had, one role where the off, the downtime, you were surrounded by a golf course that was almost just like too good to be true? Like, I can't believe they're actually paying me to do this when I get to go play golf here.
Well, my cousin Benny, when we were doing some of the stuff in the little town with the courthouse, we were staying in this golf resort. I forget what it was called, but it was on Lake Oconee.
Oh, and Reynolds Plantation?
It was close to Reynolds Plantation. Okay. Reynolds Plantation acquired this course. What was it called? Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I would wake up to the sound of I think it was the 8th tee was right by my room. So I would wake up and hear the crack or the thud of a shot landing. And that was pretty great. It was a Bob Cup course, a really nice course. And that was pretty great. And everywhere I go, whatever the course is, if you go out there on a day off, everybody else is still making the movie, but you're a character actor who's not the scene that day.
Right.
And you go to a little golf course. I'm thinking of Valdosta, Georgia now, a place called Twin Lakes.
Okay.
And you find out where to go for the best meal, where not to go to stay out of trouble. And you can learn everything from the locals that are hanging at the golf course. And you go to the pub links and you can almost always find a game. A lot of my friends, they'll call ahead and have their agents arrange for some private country club to let them play there. But and I don't take my clubs much anymore because it's such a chore now to travel.
Yeah.
So I don't really take. I'm thinking if I do this next job, which is long and out of the country, I think I will. But you you play with the locals and you learn. The great thing about being an actor on the road, as I said, you're there for more than 4 days of a tournament. You're there for as much as, like in Bagger Vance, it was 12 weeks, and my cousin Benny was probably 6 or 8 weeks. So you get a real feel for the area and the people, and that can only broaden your character and deepen your understanding of humans.
Sure, sure. You know, I want to ask you a couple of random ones. You know, you've made a career entertaining people on obviously movies and theater, but also entertaining people on TV. And I'm guessing that you're just like the rest of us. You've found your way onto a couch on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon and watching golf on TV. I'm not going to make you commissioner for a day, but you know, if you were, so to speak, an entertainment consultant for the PGA Tour, what would you make it? How would you make it more entertaining to watch?
You know what? It absolutely fascinates me. I just think that they do a great job, and I would, God, I'd have Ken Venturi back, and I'd have stuff like that. I think they do a great job, and I mean I know because they. No offense to other countries, but the way the U.S. covers golf on television is extraordinary and world class. Just the camera work and those. There's a great story about Shakespeare when he was first televising golf in the 50s, I guess, or maybe the early 60s.
Yeah.
And he had a camera operator who didn't really play golf and didn't know. And Shakespearean's yelling at him to get the camera, put it on the green. And the guy says, "It's all green."
There you
So
go.
I think they do a great job. And I'm in a situation now. We've cut the cord. We're in the building process. So we're in sort of a temporary house that will eventually get redone. And we don't have cable. We have internet and Netflix, etc. But I don't get the Golf Channel.
Oh,
and I don't get CNBC, and I am bereft. So I just think the Golf Channel should be on the internet.
Yeah,
that's all I would say. And I'm sure that if you have a certain kind of internet, it is, and you can do it by paying more. But not that I don't have the dough, but my wife will go, "Really, you're going to do that?" I go, "Nah, I guess not." But interesting. And now that I only get to watch it like I used to when it's on the weekend on a network,
right?
And it's usually only do it if it's a major tournament I really want to watch, like Colin Morikawa's great win last week.
Yeah,
I really do appreciate it because I was watching it too much. It's like a junkie, just sit there and I'll watch all 4 rounds of something, and in a weird way, I found it's just a building drama. And if it's a good tournament and it comes down to Sunday, the back 9, God, the investment of time you've made, you're really into it. It's like it's cathartic when good things or bad things happen. It's perfect drama, because perfect drama, you don't know what's going to happen. You know what they're trying to do. And actually, the best analogy I ever heard for a real drama in the theater is a football game, because you know what the offense is trying to do. They're the protagonist, and you know what the defense is trying to do. They're the antagonist. They're trying to get him to not do it, but you don't know how it's going to play out.
Yeah,
and that rivets us if it's close. And so that's what in the world of drama, what we try to achieve, or what I try to achieve, is just not let them know what's going to happen until it happens, and that holds their attention. And then, like or not like what happens, they've had a cathartic experience, which is what our excuse for being in the theater and movies.
Absolutely fascinating. Well, Bruce, I'm going to close this out by telling you a little bit of a story, which you probably, I'm sure you do not know this. So obviously you have played, you've been in other sports movies, not just Bagger Vance. You have, you played Coach Dan Darwell in the movie Wildcats with Goldie Hawn, where I learned about such riveting lines such as "knock his dick in the dirt" and "bubble his snot" and "search his jock." So as like a 14, 15-year-old kid, I got to see that on HBO. I'm just curious, where did you go to emotionally to capture those lines, Bruce?
Well, some of those came from my experience with coaches in Texas.
Okay.
Bubble his snot came from a pro football guy that was a consultant on the movie. And some of those I heard growing up here in Texas.
Sure.
Knock his dick in the dirt. I didn't want to say that. I thought that was just, that's just not necessary.
No.
We don't. And Search His Jock was scripted. So.
Of course, but it was still funnier than hell. So anyway, but that movie and then The Perfect Game You're In. But now here is a trivia question, or a trivia that you do not know. You played the role of manager Ralph Houck in the movie 61, which is basically the story of Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle chasing down Babe Ruth's home run record, and Ralph Houck was the manager of that team at the time. What you do not know is that Ralph Houck was a childhood neighbor and friend of my grandfather in Lawrence, Kansas.
Wow. The Major.
Yes, the Major. And I still have somewhere autographed baseball cards when Ralph Houck was the manager of the Twins in the mid 80s, I believe, somewhere in that neighborhood. But yes, you played. Yes, so
that's great.
And still,
I wouldn't know that.
Yeah, and still Houck. The Houck family still friends with my family up there in Lawrence, Kansas. So when I saw that,
yeah, it's cool. I like that movie a lot. That's another one except it was an HBO film, so it's not on my best movie list. But Billy Crystal did a great job, as did Barry Pepper and Thomas Jane.
Yeah,
I like that movie a lot.
Yeah, me too.
I love playing that guy. And I'm going to close on this note, because this is very important information for you to have, Ben.
Okay.
If you do a movie and you have to chew tobacco, don't let them tell you licorice will work. It melts before they get the cameras rolling.
Exactly.
Same with Tootsie Rolls.
So
you want pitted prunes.
Okay.
Because it stays all day. It spits like tobacco. It gets strings in and everything. But the punchline is you want to make sure your trailer is pretty near for the bathroom.
Gotcha.
But really, it's true. Pitted prunes, because nobody can chew tobacco 12 hours a day. That's what I was chewing. That's what I had in my cheek. There is the Major.
Wow, that's. I mean, inside movie secrets. I love it. Bruce, I can't thank you enough. This was everything and more of what I expected. I knew we were going to get some fantastic stories on, not only Bagger Vance, but your illustrious career, and get the golf clubs out soon and go play some golf, and hope we can do it again soon.
Okay, Ben, anytime. It was a pleasure talking to you, and good luck to you and to all you guys out there trying to chase that white ball for whatever reason.
And there you have it. Special thanks to Bruce McGill for joining me on this episode here at the Back of the Range. Don't forget, follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Enjoy the Masters, and we'll see you next time here at the Back of the Range.